having an open, honest conversation with your team members around their performance. So the yearly performance review is a way of the past.
30% are having regular, I don't even want to call it a performance review meeting. They're having regular sit downs to discuss the role, the expectation, what's working, what's not working on a fairly regular basis. I would say maximum 30%. As an employer, that's kind of awkward for people to be talking about their salary, but it's just going to happen.
Reducing my anxiety for me and other people is I don't typically just slack people things anymore. What I do is I have a calendar, scheduled meeting with them. It's recurring, and then I just dump all my notes there. Welcome to another episode of Dental Marketing Go. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the founder of SMC National, where we help you create, convert, and close more new patients so you can grow the way that you want. But you can't grow if you don't have hygienists because you can't get new patients onto their schedule. And everybody's dealing with this. So today I have Jennifer, who's Director of Operations, and Rachel, who's the CEO of Inspired Hygiene. And you are not going to want to miss this. We're going to go over how to attract and retain your hygienist. And both of those are really, really important. And listen, we're going to go deep into the weeds of how you actually have the conversation with your hygienist to keep them in your office and keep them motivated, and also how to attract the right kind of hygienist. And Jennifer said of how to get the best hygienist in your market and get a legal working interview. You're not going to want to miss that part. So make sure you stay tuned for this one. All right, Rachel, so why don't you tell me the number one thing that you're seeing that's driving growth at dental offices right now?
The number one thing that we're seeing at Inspired Hygiene is attracting and retaining high quality hygienists.
Yeah, I love that point because a lot of people talk about attracting the right hygienist, but part of the battle is just retaining them. No one seems to talk about that. If you retain your hygienist, you don't have to attract new hygienists. So which of these do you think is most important to start with? Should we start the conversation around attracting hygienists, or should we start it around retaining hygienists?
That's a great question. Let's take the contrary opinion and let's start with retaining. Because I think attracting hygienists is kind of the hot topic right now. Most general practices are hiring hygienists based on what we've heard and what we're seeing in some of the statistics. But I think, like you said, Gary, folks can avoid that whole exercise if they learn how to really retain their talent. Let's talk about that.
Okay, awesome. So first of all, I think this is the biggest bottleneck. So I'll explain to you guys from a marketing perspective what I'm seeing. So anytime we talk to a doctor and we say, hey, how many more new patients do you want? They always go, infinite. And like, I want 1 million new patients, right? We can't have too many. And it's like, okay. So then the next question is, how soon can you see a patient in your hygiene department? And they go, oh, we have one opening over the next 2 weeks. And it's literally impossible. Most people don't realize this. It's literally impossible to market to something that you don't have available. Like people aren't going to wait 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So what ends up happening is they end up pivoting their marketing strategy because they want to keep growing. So they either have to attract dental emergencies, which brings uninsured patients. Yes, they'll buy treatment right away, but they're uninsured. There's a reason that they're having an emergency usually. It's because they haven't been going to the dentist or they haven't been listening to their dentist. Or they're attracting like clear aligners or like implants, full arch, stuff like that, which is great. But hygiene is the center of these dental offices. So they know that they need more of that to keep growing. But if you don't have a hygienist, you don't have openings, you can't really do that. So that's kind of like my marketing perspective of it. So what are your thoughts on like, how do we actually go in and do this? Because if you solve this, then it solves a ton of other problems around growth.
Yeah, it does. And I'm going to let Jennifer comment on that in just a second. I would say to your point, Gary, about marketing, all of the specialty procedures, which are awesome, right? You want to expand the services that you provide to patients. We preach that all the time from a hygiene perspective. And a lot of the things that you mentioned, right? Like emergency patients, clear aligners. A lot of times patients come to a practice just for that, and they don't necessarily stay.
100%.
Whereas hygiene is going to create that recurring revenue, recurring relationship, recurring opportunities to diagnose needed treatment. It's just the lifeblood of the continual growth of the practice. And so, we tell our clients the exact same thing. It's like, well, how do you expect to hit your new patient goals if you don't have anywhere to put those patients? Because they're not really, if they're in the mood to see a dentist and get established, they're not necessarily going to wait 4 months unless you just have like some glowing.
You want to hear something crazy? Dental marketing agencies are dead. You got that right. They're dead. Why do I say that? Well, we don't consider ourselves a dental marketing agency. We are a growth partner. What that means is we help our clients not only create opportunities, but we help them convert them and close them as well. And that is what's needed in the day and age that we live, because just getting new patient leads is not enough. You need somebody that's going to help you actually get these new patients into your chair and make sure that they're the right kind of patient for your office. Now, we put together a whole report that will tell you where dental marketing currently is, because there's a ton of changes, tons of things are going on with the market. And we broke down what you're going to need to do to stay ahead of the industry and grow the way that you want. The link is down below. Go check it out. Everything is free. I look forward to hearing from you.
Amazing review from their brother.
Yeah,
so
they're not waiting that long.
They're just not going to wait.
Yeah,
no, they're not going to wait.
I love that. Before you comment on this, Jennifer, I call it the Netflix model versus the Mercedes model. And so what's the Netflix model? You sign up, you pay, now it's like $15 or $20 or whatever it is. It's gone up a lot. But you have this recurring revenue coming in every single month. That's the hygiene department. I know it's every 6 months, but the point is you're getting people to come back over and over and over again, versus the Mercedes-Benz model is you sell a car, and this month we sold 100 cars. And then next month when it starts again, guess what you have to do? You have to sell again, and you have to keep selling
more cars.
And if you ever stop selling, then your numbers tank. And so that's the difference between hygiene and all the other things that we listed there. Two different business models. You can mix them together, but the hygiene to me is the easiest to keep that recurring going and the easiest to build a really stable business. So Jennifer, what are your thoughts on this topic? How can our audience actually retain their hygienist?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is, having an open, honest conversation with your team members around their performance. So the yearly, performance review is a way of the past. We can't just meet with our team one time a year to go over performance and have conversations about performance and compensation, right? They do go hand in hand, contrary to popular belief. They do go hand in hand with some things there. So if you're having constant, you're having meetings with your team, just check-ins, right? It's those micro conversations, just, hey, how's it going? You're doing a great job with this. Or, you know what? We need to focus a little bit more attention on X, Y, Z, really to help to drive the growth of the practice and to help your team deliver top performance, right? Is to have those conversations. And I like to say, those performance and compensation conversations need to happen early in your relationship with that team member and often. It's very, very important to do that. And I think what is happening now more so, we're talking about retaining, top talent and top hygienists. Sometimes we wait to have those conversations until they come to us and say, hey, the office down the street is willing to pay me more. So having those conversations up front and really being open about that is very, very important, to be proactive instead of being reactive.
Okay, Jennifer, question for you. Out of not your clients, okay, so not the clients that you're currently working with, but when the clients come to you, how often are they actually having performance? Are they even doing it once a year, or are they not even doing it at all?
No. Some.
What would you say? What percentage?
Oh gosh, I don't know. What do you think, Rachel?
I would say 30% are having regular. I don't even want to call it a performance review meeting. They're having regular sit downs to discuss the role, the expectation, what's working, what's not working on a fairly regular basis. I would say maximum 30%.
Okay, and is this a conversation that the dentist is usually having with the hygienist, or is it a hygiene lead that needs to have this conversation where possible? Because and the reason I'm asking this is, like, I'm thinking about me. If I was busy trying to grow the organization, busy also being a dentist, fractional CEO at the same time, right? And then all on top of that, you want me to massage every single hygienist relationship. Sounds like a lot. Sounds like I'm almost set up for failure there.
I don't think it doesn't necessarily have to come from the dentist. It could come from a practice manager. It could come from an associate in the office. It's coming from the leaders within the practice, right? So depending on the size of your practice or, what that company structure looks like, I think the dentist still needs to, but it's not just on the dentist to have that conversation. There's others involved in it too. It's not all on one person, we'll say.
Thoughts on that, Rachel?
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. And what you're doing when you're having those micro conversations is you're setting up a communication cadence. So if their cadence is, hey, once every 3 years, we're going to have a performance review, and I'm going to sit there as an employee nervously until it's time for me to ask for the raise, right? Then it's always something that people avoid because it's always an uncomfortable, awkward conversation. Whereas if you, as the practice owner, the organizational leader at the top, really, if you're giving authority to other members in the team to have those types of conversations, then the team expects it, and they can be more organic and casual. They don't have to be like always scheduled. Although I don't think scheduling them is a bad idea because then you know they happen.
Yeah.
But then it can be things that an associate dentist could pick up on, right? They might pick up on the fact that a hygienist is out like looking for other opportunities, or they might just pick up on something subtle, maybe some comments that the hygienist is making of, hey, you know what? I think we might want to schedule some time to sit down with this hygienist and just talk to them about their commitment to the practice. How are they feeling? And just get some feedback from them. So I think that it is, to Jennifer's point, it's part of a communication of culture. A culture of communication is that if they expect to be having these conversations with people, the flip side is I only talk to, one person in the practice about my role. And that's really, I think, kind of a modern approach to it, because for so long, the rule is like, you don't talk to anybody about your compensation on your team.
Which I think it's illegal to even tell people that now, right? Like you're not.
I think it is, and it's not realistic because people are going to talk about it, and I get it. Like as an employer, that's kind of awkward for people to be talking about their salary, but it's just going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I think that way, there's more than just this one person that they're trying to kind of protect from knowing what's being discussed if there's an open communication.
Okay, I love that. And I want to get your thoughts on how to actually have these conversations. So I want you to start thinking about that. But before we do that, I want to bounce this off you. So I'm sitting here thinking, trying to put myself in the doctor or the manager's shoes. And I can understand from a busy standpoint why they're not having that conversation. But I can also understand from an economic standpoint why they're not having that conversation, because probably one of the stories they're telling themselves is, when I have this conversation, then I'm going to have to give them a raise. And if I don't give them a raise, then I'm going to lose them. So I'm not going to lose them if I don't have the conversation. But I think there's some frameworks to help people, because I'm thinking through just in conversations I've had with people where it's like, hey, we do these set raises, but you also have this bonus you can hit too. Walk me through that, Rachel. Like, how does that work? Like, how do I make this easier so I can say yes more often as the leader and put more of the pressure on the hygienist to perform rather than me just paying more just to pay more?
So Jennifer, I want to hear your input on this too, but I would say it goes back to expectations and how we're setting expectations on how a pay increase is achieved. So if you've had a 3% raise increase for the last 10 years, then of course your team is going to expect that. And if you're going to put some other method in place for them increasing their pay, then you've got to really have a plan for that.
Well, let me ask it this way, Rachel.
Go ahead.
How would you? Okay. So you are in charge of a DSO. You have 25 practices with whether that be 4 or 5 hygienists each, right? So you got about 125 hygienists. How would you structure it so that way you could have the conversation of, here's your pay, here's how often you're getting a raise, and here's how your bonuses are going to work?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to let Jennifer take that one because she's actually done that.
Yeah, Jennifer, hit us with it.
with a let's say roughly 20 location DSO, your perfect example. Yeah.
So I think it's important to have the conversation, right? I think one of the things, Gary, that you had touched on there too is every time you sit down and have a conversation with a team member about performance, the compensation part doesn't always have to go hand in hand. And I think that's why some people just don't have the conversation, because they think that it always goes hand in hand, right? Just because you sit down and talk to a team member doesn't mean that they're going to ask for a raise. So you don't have to be on the defensive. So if you have scheduled meetings, so that way, if something just comes up, you can say, oh, I'm going to talk to them about that on our next scheduled meeting, versus scheduling a meeting because something happens, right? Or because you have a thought that they may go somewhere. So scheduling a meeting is very, very important just to have it set. It could be once a month. It could be every other month, depending on the practice.
I absolutely love that. I don't want to interrupt you mid-thought because I want to keep this train of thought, but I totally agree with you. One of the things that's helped me as a leader with reducing my anxiety for me and other people is I don't typically just Slack people things anymore, text message, or just say, hey, Rachel, why didn't you do this? Or hey, why didn't this happen? And then in between conversations, what I do is I have a calendar, scheduled meeting with them. It's recurring. And then I just dump all my notes there. And then we have a conversation about it. And it reduces anxiety for them and for me, because if I'm trying to communicate in between meetings and I'm in the rush and I'm going over here and I'm just like, hey, Rachel, why did this happen? Rachel might read into that and go, well, is Gary mad? And I might read into Rachel's response because of that. But if we just have a scheduled meeting 5 days later for just regular, hey, Rachel, what happened with this situation? Just was curious. And you have this great explanation. It helps give clarity. So I totally agree with you on that. So sorry to interrupt you, but I want to keep plowing down that road.
No, absolutely. Because it is so important, not just for you, but also for the team member, right? So if things come up, then they know that they have an opportunity to sit down and meet with you to go over those things. You're just setting the expectation and setting a time to be able to do that. And you are dedicated to them. Also, by doing that, you tend to get less interruptions throughout the day because it's not, trial by fire. It's, okay, we got this. We're ready to go. Oh, we're going to talk about that in our call next week or our meeting next week. So it just helps to make things a lot smoother so you can put your attention to other things that are very important as well, right? So, talking about the conversation regarding compensation of just team members and hygienists in general. So when you sit down and you have that conversation, whether it's yearly, I think, Rachel, you were talking about, if they're used to getting a 3% raise every year, sometimes that's not feasible, right? So as a business owner, you need to think of other ways that you can help to compensate your team that may not always be the 3%. It could be adding the service mix of the hygienist. So that
how
way
would you structure it? You're in charge, Jennifer. I've just given you the head roll.
Yes.
25 locations, 20 locations with 125 hygienists. Clean slate. We just changed ownership, so they already know a new system is coming in. How would you structure it?
So for me, what I like is have an hourly rate, right? A good, solid hourly rate. But then to also have an opportunity. How do you figure that out?
Define good for me. How do you know what a good hourly rate is?
So many different things, right? You can look at salary.com, look for your area. You can look at, there's a ton of different resources out there. Like Dental Post is a great resource every year. Just collect all of your information to understand what that looks like. You can go on Indeed and see what other people are offering too, just to see where you are in the market. So I'd start
So where
there.
Would you put it? So you got the market range. Let's say it's your market range is $60 to $80 per hour for a hygienist in your market. Where would you put your dollar amount for salary?
Depends what you can afford, to be honest, right?
Okay.
You have to look and say, okay, where are we with, what procedure, what insurances are we in network with, right? What is our net production? It's not gross, right? You have to look at net production, what you're actually taking in and what you can afford to give, right? What you can afford to compensate. From there, if you have a, base compensation and hourly rate, what you could do is look at that net production and say, okay, each month or each quarter, let's look at what that net production is, and anything over your hourly rate, right? Like take that net production and say 30%, whatever you're over, then we're going to give you that. If you're under, you still get the base rate, but at least it gives them an opportunity to do more, to get compensated more, and they're giving the best patient care. But with that, it's important to have great policies and procedures in place so we're not over-treating patients, right? We need to make sure that the patient is always the top priority. And when we're giving them the best care using those policies and procedures that we have, then this comes from that.
So there's really a clinical partnership that has to take place right here, right? Because this can't be done in isolation with the hygiene department alone, because the clinical model has to be led by the dentist that then the hygienist plugs into. Is that right? Am I understanding that right?
I would say yes, although you want the hygiene team to absolutely have input on those clinical philosophies. So, finding the way we do this is we utilize AAP standards and, really help facilitate this conversation with the team on, okay, what are our clinical standards going to be? What is the threshold from when a patient's going to move from this preventative procedure into a therapeutic procedure? And what are the variables around that so that, and all the clinicians that are involved in that decision-making, which, the dentist is going to make the ultimate diagnostic decision, but most dentists that we work with, they want the hygienist to take ownership of that.
Yeah.
And to lead that to the point where they can easily say, yes, I agree with you, and make that final decision. So if they're expecting that, then the hygienist needs to be able to have some input on that so that they will buy into those standards of care and those policies.
I love that. Yeah, I am totally with you. I think it's a team effort, but there has to be some guide rails in there that somebody's working off of.
There has to be a leader.
Yeah.
Right. Some guide rails and also someone to kind of make that final decision, which is why every organization, dental organization with multiple locations or a single location, have to have a strong, confident clinical leader and somebody that the team will follow. Now, I will add to Jennifer's point, is it is very important for the leadership team to be able to clearly explain and illustrate to the hygienist what that compensation model means and give them some examples of, hey, here's a day. If we were to schedule you like this, if you were to have, 2 days a week that look like this and 2 days a week that look like this on a schedule and make it realistic, this is what you could make. So you have to paint the picture very clearly for them because, we're used to, the three of us have very entrepreneurial, tendencies.
Yeah.
That goes without saying, but we're able to kind of, we're willing to take some risks, right? To know that there's going to be a greater reward. And if something's not tracking, we immediately are going to kind of pivot and take a different approach.
Yep.
Well, not all employees or team members are like that. And they also don't always have the autonomy to take that different approach. You've got to check with somebody sometimes. So in order for them to see the opportunity, it has to be painted very clearly. And whatever the compensation model is, it needs to be very clear. So what you described, Jennifer, is very clear. There aren't a whole lot of variables around it with regards to if you sell 25 of this procedure, you're going to get 10% on the next 5 procedures, and then you're going to get 20% on the next 5. That gets really difficult for a team member to wrap their brain around. And so sometimes they just shut down. They're like, I don't subconsciously, I don't even know how to calculate this. And so I'm overwhelmed and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing.
So you need something that helps people understand, get buy-in. It has to work for the doctors. It has to work for the hygienist. So let's assume now we got this.
And the patients.
And the patients too. Yes, the good call out. So we got this hygiene system. We got doctor buy-in. We've protected the patients. The hygienists understand the upside. I have regular scheduled meetings with them. So I don't always have to talk about raises as when I'm having these now because they know how to make more money. And so I'm more talking about performance over just pay me more. That I think solves a lot of problems. From there, what questions should I be asking my hygienist when I'm having regular meetings with them? What do you have a framework that you use, or what would you be asking on a regular basis?
The questions that we ask are just really simple. It's what's working within the practice and the hygiene department specifically. What's working well? What do we need to be doing more of? It might be, hey, when last month you called all the new patients and then, we're not doing that anymore, probably just because the doctor didn't get the list or they forgot or whatever. That really seemed to work. People, every time a new patient would come in, they were talking about how great it was to get a call from the doctor. So can we go back to doing that? And because you say you want to increase this and they seem to be more receptive to treatment and that kind of thing. So what's working? What do we need to be doing more of? And what's not working, or is there anything that you need to perform at the level that's expected for you to achieve this, production goal or whatever that is that you don't have? Is there anything way that we can support you? Is there something that you need to perform at this level that you feel like you don't have?
I love that. So that's pretty simple. It's what can we do better? And what do you need more of? or what is going well, and so straightforward. And any other thoughts on that, Jennifer? Any other questions that you would put in your bag there if you were having those regular meetings?
Yeah, I think it's important to touch base with the team, everything that's going on in the practice. And sometimes it's also good to ask them just like, hey, how's it going? Anything outside of the office? Do you need support with anything, right? Like put that human touch in it, because we're all there. We spend a lot more time with our team than we do with our families, right? So just, is there anything that you can do to, that I can support you in office, or anything else that I can support you out of the office, right? That's when it might come up that you find out that, maybe the team member that you're talking to is having challenges with childcare and needs to pick up their child at 5:00, but you work until 5, right? They may need a little bit more flexibility. And had you not asked, they might not have said anything. So, and that could be a reason for them to leave, right? So just open up the conversation and just ask the question, because they may not say it on their own.
I think that's a really good point for them to open up. And one thing that you said, Jennifer, a while back that really stuck with me and is so true, because it's something that I really work on. But, sometimes we're better at things than others. But is if you know of something in their personal life that's coming up, and you're a team member, or even more importantly, a leader, like make sure that you take note of that and that you ask them about that. Because, the 3 things that we're hearing from team members, dental staffing, that they want is they want healthy culture, they want, competitive pay, and they want flexibility. So, if there's something like you said, gosh, I'm really struggling right now because my mother needs extra care and I'm having a hard time getting from here to, where she lives to check on her every night. Then you all of a sudden, to ask about how's your mom doing and how's it going with the caregiving, and is there anything I can do to support you? Like those things, culture is about relationship. I mean, I think to have a healthy culture is really to have those solid relationships with the people that you work with. It's not just about having regular meetings or going out to lunches or do volunteering. It really, at the core of it, is valuing each other and valuing relationships.
That's such a good point. So just to sum this up, so that we're talking about retention right now, retaining our hygienist. How do we retain our hygienist? We have clear meetings with them. We have clear, concise, and total team buy-in, meaning the doctor, the hygienist, and the patients. So we're protecting the patient, so we're not over-treating and those kind of things. And we have a way that the hygienist can make more money, and it's very clear to them. They understand it. It's not a convoluted formula. And we're having those meetings regularly, and we're connecting with them on a human level too. We're not just like, all right, Rachel, what did you hit your KPIs today? Yes or no? All right, improve. It's like, how are you? How's your family? How's life? Be human about it. And and that's how organic relationships are formed. And then, so I think we covered a lot there. I think this is really good. If someone listens to this and you're not doing this, chances are you're probably going to lose your hygienist, because they are being courted, right? Like the hygienists are the hottest commodity inside of dental right now, even more so than dentists, which I know sounds weird because you need a dentist. Technically, dentists can do the hygiene.
There are more dentists, though.
There's more dentists. And also dentists are in a weird position right now coming out of school because they're $500,000 in debt. And they're also being courted earlier in the process. So it's almost like college recruitment, where it's like for MBA right now, they're starting to recruit like junior high kids, and colleges are talking to really young kids. Same thing's happening in dental recruiting. It's like it starts freshman, sophomore year. Hey, let me introduce you to a DSO that's working at the college. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot more recruiting there, where with hygienists, that doesn't work quite the same way. So now let's talk about how do we actually now attract hygienists. And I would love your thoughts on this. This is something actually we just sent out a newsletter on, and I talked to a couple other people in a mastermind that I was in about this. Something that I've seen that hygienists are looking for, or I'll pose it this way. Why would a hygienist work for your dental office versus working for a recruiter? And people were like, well, it's more consistent. And I was like, okay, let me give you all the pros of working for a recruiter or a temp agency, I should say.
A temp agency.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to get paid more by the temp agency per hour. I'm going to get to be able to pick my hours. a lot of the temp agencies are now offering insurance, which some of the dental offices don't even offer health insurance.
Yep.
And if I go to an office and I don't like it, then I just say, I don't want to ever go to that office again. Now, the downside is I don't have any routine. I might have to drive a little bit further, a little bit shorter, right? I might also be thrown into some really, really toxic, hard to work places, right? So there are pros and cons, but the number one thing that I've seen the dental hygienists want is flexibility. And so what I've been seeing DSOs do or groups do is instead of saying, hey, the only way you can work for us is full-time at this rate, they've been saying, we are looking for part-time hygienists that can pick their own schedules. And all of a sudden the applications start rolling in. Let's start the conversation around there. And I'll tee it up to either of you, whatever one you guys want to take this. What are your thoughts on that? And then how do we keep expanding on that to attract more hygienists?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I wish I had an exact statistic, and I have looked all over for it. So if anybody knows, please send it to me. Of the percentage of hygienists who are doing this temporary work versus being even a full-time or part-time, consistent employee of a practice. And a lot of the temp agencies are also getting their act together with regards to making sure they're legitimately employed by the temp agency and all the tax stuff is being done correctly, right? So now, and I've had some conversations with some of them, and I've said, hey, you've got to make sure your messaging is also attractive to the dentists, because I could see on one hand, the dentist feeling very threatened by that. Is how am I ever going to build this consistent workforce and staff that's going to build relationships with my patients if they're all just kind of in and out? That's very chaotic for a team for there to be a different hygienist. However, I can say this because I worked as a temp hygienist for an organization for 3 years, and it was the only place that I worked. But I did it because I was in my, I'm going to say it was in my late 20s. And I liked the organization. I didn't like it was a very large, it was a state organization. I didn't like the politics around kind of getting caught up in all of that. And I wanted to travel. I would, book my patients out 3 months because it was a perio practice. And I made sure that I planned my trips out, and I would schedule around so nobody had to be rescheduled. I would find people to fill in if I needed to. And I was very thoughtful around it, but it gave me the opportunity when I was single and didn't have children to be able to do some things like that. And I was really happy with that arrangement. And I think they were too. And so it's not always a bad thing. And I think that there are some ways that dental practices can use it, to help fulfill their staffing needs. But I can understand where the challenges are. And I just encouraged, the staffing agencies to say, hey, just find out also what's the benefit in this for the dentist, for the practice owner.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of them are going to see it as threatening. And one in particular is, offering if the dental practice does hire this hygienist, that there's no fee, there's no hiring fee.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty attractive, because then it's kind of a way for both parties to check each other out. And it's not the awkward working interview that I think we've all learned is not really in compliance with HR laws and things like that now. Yeah. So it's a way to do that in a way that's legal and
I love that.
And legitimate.
Well, now, and I'll be honest with you, it's the way I think about this is that traditionally, because people put up job ads and they're I literally hear from people, put up a job ad, I'm in the top 10% of salary, I have a really aggressive bonus system, and I've gotten 2 applications. And by the time I contacted them, they're already hired. Literally, people are saying stuff like that. And so the way I think about this is you have to realize your competition has shifted. It's not just other dental practices, it's the recruiters. Now, I'm going to tell you what I would do in this situation. I would love your thoughts, Jennifer, on this. Here's what I would do. I would sign up for all the temp agencies, and I would bring in every single hygienist that I could get my hands on. I know it would make operations a little bit messy up front, and I would tell my team that it's going to be messy because we're bringing in new people. And I would identify the top hygienists from the recruiting or from the temp agencies, and then I would recruit them that way and say, hey, I can give you everything that they're giving you, plus more, plus consistency, plus a great working culture. What do you think, Jennifer? Does that sound like a good plan? And then And then from there, now I have working interviews, legal working interviews. What are your thoughts on that? Am I out of bounds, or is that a good strat?
No, that's what I used to do. So, because look, temp agencies are here to stay, and they're a great resource when we need them, right? So why not utilize the benefits that we can get from that too? So exactly like you said, Gary, have them come in, find great hygienists, through there, and get them to understand your culture. And one thing that we do, and that Rachel has talked about, is they're not a temp hygienist, they're a guest hygienist. If you change that verbiage, it instantly changes who they feel that they are, right? And who the team feels that they are. So if you tell a patient that comes in, hey, we have a guest hygienist today, she's fantastic, he's fantastic, it changes the mentality there too. So it makes it a positive instead of, oh, I have a temp today, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very easy
it's a recruiting
switch.
Opportunity. It's a recruiting opportunity. Yeah,
exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. So, definitely with that. And I think, we had talked about flexibility there too. That is so important now. Making sure that we were talking about the conversation. So that, with your team member. So with your current team that you have and the team that you want to have, right? Having that flexibility. So a lot of practices now are doing shift schedules, right? And if they're not doing it, they're looking into it to try and see how they could do that. You have some team that comes in the morning, and another team that comes in the afternoon, and you can shift it that way. Having team members come in for huddle at first thing in the morning to the end of the day, it's getting to be few and far between, right? It's kind of a way of from the past. It's still out there. Don't get me wrong, but we need to shift our mindset so that way we can hire and retain top team members. So if they need flexibility, then we need to be flexible. So, we're flexible for our patients and trying to accommodate their schedule. We need to be flexible for our team too.
Yeah, I love that you shared that, because that was something that came to mind as we were talking earlier. Is I remember one multi-location group that we worked with that all the shifts were 5 hours. And, they started at 7 a.m. So they had a morning shift, and then they haven't had an afternoon evening shift. And they would choose how many shifts a week that they wanted to work. And they typically had a relatively set schedule, but if something was coming up, and let's say their child had some event in the afternoon, they might swap a shift with somebody else. And so it worked out really well. I mean, there were some hygienists that would work 5-hour shifts a week. And there were some that would work, 7 or 8 5-hour shifts a week.
Yeah.
So I think that's really a great point that you bring up, Jennifer. And honestly, I hadn't thought about that, the huddle piece, but with a lot of the technology that we have today, like a lot of the analytic systems and the scheduling systems and patient communication, people can see their schedule ahead of time. And, they can prep the schedule. And obviously, they're going to be scheduling changes, but there's so many ways to communicate with team members. And that's one of the things that we suggest with the guest hygienists. It's like, give them some insight on the patients that are going to show up that day. Like, what are they expecting to do? And, so that it's not just, hey, surprise, like you just get there and you never know. It's very stressful.
Yeah.
It's very stressful for really, honestly, everybody involved, because I always felt like I looked like I didn't know what I was doing, because I'm opening every drawer and I'm like, trying to look at the patient's schedule at the last minute, and the patient feels that vibe, and the rest of the team, it's chaotic and feels, So I love that approach, Gary. I mean, why not?
Yeah. I think the key that people need to catch here is that the old way of doing it is not going to work. Like, it's just not.
That's right.
You have to change. You have to change the hours that people are working, how you're paying them. The other thing that gets really tricky about this is, like, if you're trying to hire full-time people, you already have full-time people, there's going to be some people who watch how much money you're posting, and they're all going to say, hey, why am I not making that? And so when you move to a part-time model and a hybrid model, you can now start to play with some of the hourly or the how you're paying, and those questions don't come up because it's a totally different model. And maybe the other team gets on board, maybe they don't. You will need more support in operational management, right? So if before it used to take 5 hygienists to run the show, and now per office or whatever, and now you need 10 to do the same amount of work, they're all
Yeah.
part-time. That takes more management bandwidth, right? Like that's just the long and the short of it. But that's a better problem to have than not having enough hygienists.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's going to require us, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Jennifer, and also Gary, from a marketing and customer communication standpoint. Is I think we need to do this now. It's not a think, I know it.
Yeah.
We have to do this now. Is we've got to figure out how to communicate that to our patients, so that patients don't think. You and I have talked about this before on a previous podcast. Man, this dentist must be awful to work for because there's a different hygienist here every day.
Yep.
So there is that challenge of building relationships with a provider. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? I'm going to turn the table on you of how could we communicate that to the patients, that we have a different set of hygienists, that you might not see the same person every time.
Well, I don't think that's like, I'm just going to speak from personal experience of going to the hygienist. When they say, hey, Gary, when do you want to schedule your next hygiene appointment? I go, they go, here's the dates and options. And I go, I want that one. All you have to do is put it in their window of when they're going to be there. I don't think that's as big of an issue for existing patients. It's for sure not an issue for new patients. New patients don't care. I know some people, you could change hygienists every single day. New patients do not care about that because it's the first time.
Know. Or do they don't even know.
They don't know. You could be there for 100 years or for your first day.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea. So I don't see that as big of an issue. Where you might run into a little bit of issues, or where you're going to definitely run into huge issues, it was with turnover. When you lose the hygienist and you have to explain that, that's where you run into problems and you start to lose patient referrals. And I've seen this firsthand where we track total new patients, patient referrals versus marketing referrals. When hygienists leave, your patient referrals drop. Sometimes it's 10%.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's 20%. Sometimes I've seen as big as 30, 40%. That means if you're getting 50 new patients a month, 25 of those are coming from patient referrals. All of a sudden, you can have 10 to 15 of those disappear and you're just not getting them anymore and you have to build those back up. So I think that's the problems that we're describing by building out this new model are smaller than the problems that we're facing. And it just takes a little bit of a mental exercise because it's new.
Yeah, I think you're right that the problems are smaller than not having a hygienist at all and getting a backlog of patients, which is bad for patients and access to care and all of that. And it's not good for practices because if you have fewer patients coming into the door, you're going to have less treatment diagnosed and less opportunities to care. However, I will say, I think that communication and I think it's a bigger problem as a hygienist and one that's in practices all the time of communicating to the patients why they're not seeing the same hygienist. And we preach that all the time. It's like, look, you are a team of hygienists. And here's why having practice protocols instead of provider protocols is so important. Because everybody on this team has to agree, like, yeah, I get it. Okay, this is the way we're going to treat these patients, and they're going to get the same treatment. Like, they're going to get blood pressure, whether they see Rachel or they see Jennifer. They're going to get their blood pressure screening. They're going to get a oral cancer screening, whether they see Rachel or like they've got to allow the time for the hygienist to do those things. And they've got to impress the importance of that. And there are going to be some hygienists that say, I don't want to do all that. I don't want to do that. I just want to come in here and I want to clean teeth today. I don't want to do all that. And so they may not be a fit for your practice. But I think it's a bigger issue in that communication piece. I think it can be overcome. But that's something I think that Jennifer, you and I, that would be a really good thing for us to brainstorm with our team on how can we give some resources on, communicating when you have a number of different hygienists that are coming in.
Yeah.
So good.
Absolutely.
This has been so good. I've learned a lot. I know the audience is as well, but this is complicated. If it was easy, then everybody would just do it, right? There are a lot of moving parts. So if someone wants help with this and wants to pick your guys' brain, how can they reach out to you, Rachel?
Yeah. So they can reach out to, they go to our website, inspiredhygiene.com. There's a link on there to schedule a complimentary discovery call with our senior program advisor, Kim. I would encourage everybody to do that, have a conversation. Also, you can just email us at clients@inspiredhygiene. We didn't even really touch on like the tips that we see about a great ad posting, things like that. We've got a tool called 17 Tips to Attract Hygienists to Your Practice. So if you want to send us an email at clients@inspiredhygiene.com, we will send that to you. Happy to share that with you. And just follow us on social, and we'd love to have a conversation to see how we can help you put some of these things in place and set some of this up and really get back to that thriving hygiene department.
So good. Thanks so much for coming on, guys.